Okay, hello A-level literature students. We're going to have a PowerPoint on Passing and Glassing today by Christina Rossetti. So here we go. So first of all, some explanation of the terms. The title, Passing and Glassing. The glass is the reference to mirrors. Okay, and there are two mirrors referred to. We have a looking glass and a tiring glass. Both of those are now fairly archaic terms for mirrors. Alice in Wonderland's sequel, Alice Through the Looking Glass, reminds us, or is the way to remember, that that used to be what one would call a mirror. And a tiring glass, we can assume, is one in which you can get dressed, so a nice full-length mirror. Tiring, like the word attire, is to put your clothes on. So women in this poem are associated with mirrors. Women in culture generally are associated with mirrors, particularly in the Victorian period, when for ladies looking for the one exciting thing that will happen in their life, which is getting married, they need to care about their appearance because they need to make themselves attractive to a gentleman, for it is up to the gentleman to choose which lady he's going to ask to marry. Passing, as we are very familiar with by now from Rossetti's poetry, is to do with things declining and then dying. So passing can be a synonym for dying, but can also be a more general reference to things going by, often good things going by and leaving less good things behind. And so the logic of the poem, or the argument of the poem, is that the way things age and die, which is passing, is a useful reflection for women. A better lesson than they'll learn by looking in a mirror. So passing and glassing, the rhyme between those two words is a sort of pun or a play on words, where Rossetti is going to say, look at things passing rather than look at a reflection of yourself in a mirror, focusing on appearance. So this is one of those places where vanity is quite literally caring about your appearance. Rossetti uses vanity quite often in that broader sense of putting any faith and hope in things of this world. Has a complex but regular structure. So there are 8-line stanzas. There are 3 8-line stanzas. I counted the syllables, which are fairly regular, but I've also counted the metre, because obviously syllables and metre are not always the same thing. The last 2 lines are of the same length, and then between that you get alternating things going on. In terms of form, in terms of what is being talked about in each, or structure, what is being talked about in each stanza and how that goes on through, stanza 1 focuses on the metaphor that women are like fruit and flowers. They will fade and die. Beauty and love exist and are beautiful and lovely, but they are brief. In stanza 2, we then get a bit of comfort. After youth and beauty, women can still be useful and cared for, like some flowers. And then stanza 3 is the most profound, the most complex stanza. You need to have fully understood stanza 1 and 2 to get where she's going by the time she gets to stanza 3. Seems fairly straightforward. The world and life are full of both good and bad things. What matters are these 2 words she uses, work and will. This links to Rossetti's high Anglican Christianity, whereby works count. I know this seems like a really obtuse theological point, but it's worth bearing in mind. Remember in the Moonstone, where Miss Clack appalls Rachel by suggesting her mother hasn't gone to heaven because she hasn't been born again. And what Rachel says is, my mother who did all those good deeds, cared for the poor, was loved by the local people. So strict evangelical Protestant Christianity does not believe your good works stand you in any stead with God. Okay? Whereas a more traditional high church Anglican Roman Catholic faith does believe that good works will help and you should do them. So works and will links to Christina Rossetti's specific kind of Christianity. The poem ends with the idea that God is eternal, he's beyond time. Yeah, so in a poem that focuses on linear human time, born, grow up, things are young, things are beautiful, then things fade, and then things die, God exists outside that continuum. He's foreseen everything that has happened and will happen. This is quite a strong idea in Christianity, that God doesn't just know everything that has happened, he also knows everything that will happen. And I guess that's the logic of if you stand beyond time. And this idea is of comfort to the speaker of the poem, but in particular, she is giving this as a lesson of comfort to the reader. The tone is quite detached and authoritative. Okay, so this is a poem in which Rossetti is taking on that persona of a religious teacher, of someone who herself has the wisdom that she talks about in the final stanza. She tells you how things are, especially in the first two stanzas. Lots of declarative sentences and third person pronouns, they. Okay, so it's not a you, me poem. It's got this detached, looking at things from a distance, third person pronouns. The final stanza becomes more personal, and we get the personal possessive our, according to our work and will. In the final two lines, the all-knowing voice or all-knowing God can tell the past, present, and the future. Our doings have been done, past tense, and that which shall be, future tense, was. So all the tenses all together to reflect what she's saying about the nature of God. So we'll have a look at some of the diction and what effect that might have. There are lots and lots of words associated with female beauty and flowers. So once she's made that metaphor, words then carry those two meanings. So when you think about a word like bloom, the woman, when she looks, not when she looks in the mirror, but when she looks at things that pass, they act like a mirror, but like a truthful mirror. Don't look in the mirror and see how young and beautiful you are. No, look outside and watch the beautiful flowers fade. And that's a true reflection of what your life holds for you. They show her how her bloom must fade. Okay, so that bloom literally means the beauty of a young woman. There's a negative word, unlovely. That's what a beautiful lady's got to look forward to. Withered roses and the fallen peach, unlovely. Out of reach. Out of reach, i.e. you can never go back and pick up that beauty again. It's gone. So a very strong focus on appearance, particularly women's appearance in that first stanza. There are lots of proper names of fruit and flowers. So if you think about the Pre-Raphaelites and in their art, their visual art, one of the things they're very famous for is detailed natural imagery, not just random flowers, but beautiful, natural, real little English flowers decorating sort of the setting of their paintings. So we have roses, the peach, the violet, the lavender. There's a repetition of some words that therefore must be significant. Withered is repeated, with withered roses in the shade, with withered roses and the fallen peach. And you see once again how the withered literally applies to the flowers, metaphorically applies to a woman. It's quite a harsh word, isn't it, to describe what happens to females' beauty, that she withers. In stanza 2 we have sweet, and that's quite a nice contrast to stanza 1 with a focus on that withering, that even when the things are dyed and dried, they have a sweetness, they retain a sweetness. The faded lavender is sweet, sweet the dead violet, and in fact is repeated over the line, ends one line, starts the next. In the final stanza we start to get some religious diction, which echoes a biblical line from an Old Testament book called Ecclesiastes, which is also sometimes called wisdom books, which is significant in a poem where she talks about wisdom. So the line from Ecclesiastes, which you've probably heard because it's become a saying, there's nothing new beneath the sun, or nowadays we might say there's nothing new under the sun. She says, for there is nothing new beneath the sun. And what she means is to God. Yeah, nothing can surprise him, them. So, as we might expect, that's mostly simple lexis. Rossetti's not using polysyllables if she doesn't need to or want to. There are words with connotations of the negative effects of time, which eventually ends in death, sort of implicit within that. So pass has connotations of pass away, although, like I said, just pass by, because time keeps going. But shade as well, having those together with withered roses in the shade, has the connotations of death, as does fallen with withered roses and the fallen peach. So shades sometimes used to describe ghosts, but also just that idea of, a sort of shady place where you go when you're dead. And the fallen is a word to describe people who have died. In stanza 2, we have the adjectives faded to describe the flowers. The violet then is described as dead, and also dried. The dried up violets and dried lavender. So that's all what happens as we age. Culling, the word cull, literally is to harvest plants by cutting them, but I don't think that word has been chosen randomly. It has connotations of death and actually killing. Yeah, a cull. So we look at the structure of the grammar, adding to the structure of the poem and the thoughts and the form. Each stanza is one long multi-clause sentence. The clauses follow a similar structure in each stanza, which may also be reflected in rhyme scheme. So think about how, when you want to talk, if you want to, and it is always good to, think about structure, think about how rhyme scheme and grammar are supporting how the message, how the story is being told. So we have 2 lines that introduce what might well be a surprising idea. Okay, all things that pass are like a mirror for women. And that idea twice, really. And then lastly, all things that pass are wisdom's looking glass. So if you watch All Things That Pass, it will teach you about wisdom. And then the next 2 3-line clauses elaborate on that idea. So there's the idea. It's meant to be hard and complex. Then you read the rest of the stanza and it elaborates and explains why that is the case. There's a complex use of tense in each stanza, moving between present, future and past, which links very much into the theme of what the poem is about. The poem is about time and the passing of time. So you can see that there's lots in the present tense. All things that pass are women's retiring glass. The faded lavender is sweet. But then past tense, cold and laid by and cared for yet. And then still sweet may comfort her. So that's it. I mean, it's not a future tense, but it's a future idea. So symbolism and imagery. Roses in the first stanza are a long-standing symbol for both young women and passionate love. Virgins being linked to rosebuds goes way back to the early Renaissance poetry. So the rosebud is the sort of not the implication, the promise that an unmarried lady has. Bloom is that perfect moment when they're fully beautiful, but it's very short-lived. So those are our roses, but also the peach. Peaches are beautiful, they're soft and sweet. And if you think about the skin of a peach, in fact, it's still a word people use today to try and sell beauty products to women, isn't it? Some peachy skin. And once again, the idea of the seasons as reflecting times of life. So summer is when we have our roses and our peach. It's the prime of life, the prime of love. Summer joy, that was. Yeah, so that's a pleasure, but it passes. Whereas the lavender and the violets, they're more associated, not metaphorically or symbolically so much, but actually in reality, they have this long-lasting scent. For Victorians in particular, they were used to scent houses and clothing. So it would be gathered, dried, and then put around in bowls. I don't think Victorians used the word potpourri. I don't know, but that's the idea. In terms of sound, work and will alliterate in the final stanza, and that's one of the key things. That's actually the message of the poem when she gets there. Also, doings and done. According to our work and will, our doings have been done. And that's both in the final stanza, where we get this rhetorical force and possibly even a biblical ring to this where she gets her conclusions in. Wisdom starts with the same letter as women. It's got the same number of syllables, so that link all things that pass are women's looking glass, all things that pass are woman's tiring glass, all things that pass are wisdom's looking glass. So really obvious substitution of wisdom for women. And it really links women and wisdom, which is an unusual idea for the Victorians. And so I think we can talk about Rossetti being quite proto-feminist, making a point, making an argument for women being able to gather religious wisdom. The rhyme scheme is going A, A, B, 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 C, C, A. Okay, so the key thing I would say there is that returning to the first line rhyme in the final line, giving a nice sense of conclusion to each stanza. Now I know was and pass is only a half rhyme, but that is the rhyme. It creates a faint sound reminder of how the stanza started. In 1 and 3, it's a half rhyme. It's pass and was in both of them. Full rhyme in the second stanza. So remember, find a pattern and then find where it changes. And that's going to be significant. So pass rhymes with alas, so that word really stands out and has an exclamation mark on it. So it's about comfort. That may comfort her, nor need she cry, alas. So if you think about all Rossetti's poems about disappointment and looking back with sadness or with some ruefulness on her youth and chances she had and decisions she made and things she did or didn't do, this is a poem that says, actually, be comforted. You don't need to cry, alas, that your youth and beauty has passed and maybe your chances or hopes or dreams of love that seem to be tied in with being young and beautiful. The rhymes are nearly all single words. You could say that gives you some simplicity and power. The two that aren't monosyllables are the names of the flowers repeated and reversed. Sweet is only a half rhyme with violet and yet. So that's in stanza 2. The faded violet is sweet, cold and laid by and cared for yet. Where's the violet? Sweet to the dead violet. Sorry, the faded lavender is sweet, sweet to the dead violet, cold and laid by and cared for yet. And also, if you say violet, like I do, you don't hear the rhyme so much. If you say violet, I guess you do. But sweet is definitely only a half rhyme in there. The metre is iambic. There are some exceptions in the second stanza. Sweet the dead violet. Yeah, so the stress comes on let at the end of violet. The 6th line has an extra syllable. We can call that a feminine line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with withered roses and the fallen peach. In each stanza, that is the longest line. I've worked out the metre a bit more specifically than this. The opening lines are very short. They only have 2 beats. All things that pass. Yeah, so that's really short little da-da. Then our woman's looking glass. Then you get 3, and then you tend to get 3, 4, 3, 4. But then that long line at line 6 with withered roses and the fallen peach. With withered roses and the fallen peach. Maybe you still only get 5. The dried up violets and dried lavender. For there is nothing new beneath the sun. I think I can find 5 if I try. With withered roses and the fallen peach. There we go. The dried up violets and dried lavender. Ish. Yeah, but that is definitely getting this build up to the 6th line, which is the longest. So you might want to say, if you're commenting on something already that's in one of those lines, that's when you would think to yourself, oh, that's also the long line or the really short line. So I've talked through some of the context as we've been going along, but I will just bring those up to you. This is really interesting. It suggests the role that Christianity offered to Victorian women, gentlewomen, beyond this restricting of roles to just wife or mother, wife and mother. Rossetti's, so the context here is Rossetti's choice of a single life, rejecting the pressure to marry and make oneself attractive to or for men. Also think about, and I know we've talked about this, the Victorian mockery and how they're quite rude about spinsters. which is overturned in this poem. This poem insists on women's usefulness throughout their life, that they can achieve wisdom, but also, you know, they can be useful like the lavender and the violets. That's the point about those in stanza 2. Stanza 1, this is terrible, the flowers fade. That's a really bad, horrible message for young, pretty ladies. Stanza 2, let's look at some other flowers that get dried and are still useful. Sweet, and the faded lavender is sweet, sweet the dead violet. They're culled and laid by and cared for yet. Yeah, so it's not like you're going to be despised and thrown away. You will still be cared for. That's why they offer you comfort. So, and as I say in stanza 3, this radical idea that women can have wisdom, especially in religious matters. Okay, so, you know, the themes are linked to these contexts quite a bit. The restrictions on gentlewomen in Victorian England, the contrast between worldly and religious concerns. So caring about your physical appearance is definitely a worldly concern, whereas trying to develop wisdom and not caring about those things is religious. And the vanity of valuing the transient things of this world, not only your beauty, but even the beauty of nature. Okay.